just because that is my background. So just to pray, and then we'll get started. Guys on the tech, I have a bit of an echo. Please help me out. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Tolu. How are you? Deals.me. Is it deal.me? Yeah. Pardon? Deal me. Okay, deal me. All right. All right. I think my echo is gone. All right, Father, we thank you for today. Thank you for your kindness. I ask, God, that you would come, be with us, speak to people's hearts, help push their careers forward in whichever dimension, careers, business, ministry, whatever it is, God. I just pray that as we talk today, question and answer, the content, that people will really be impacted and changed. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So the plan originally was that you will arrive and you would network with the people on your table, but we'll probably do that in the break. There's a break coming up, but I'm just going to kind of push through my content to kind of get the content going. All right. So you can have my first slide, please. Oh, I have the controller. Well, I don't. Where's my controller? I'm supposed to have it, but I don't have it. All right, thank you. Okay, so here's the agenda that we're going to go through today. We're kind of going to kick off. I'm going to do a bit of an intro, set the scene, kind of lay some ground rules. Then I'm going to take you on the lessons from my own life. And then we'll have a break. So I realized that I would have been monologuing for too long. So we'll have a break. And in that break, you can network on your tables, and we'll have some questions. And then we'll come back to talk about the 7 keys to thriving in a sudden change. And then we'll conclude with Q&A. So your participation is going to make this go a little bit better. Okay. So I have to do a quick introduction to kind of introduce who I am a little bit. And I will talk more about my career journey in a second. But on the top left there is my family. So I have 4 children. 3 biological and 1 by marriage. And so I'm blessed to have that, and I'm blessed to be married to Kumbi, who is my wife for 29 years this year. And my mother-in-law is here. My father also is here. So they've come to join us today for this event. And there are other people in the audience that are here to support what's going on. So a bit of my background. I'm a writer, and you can see at the bottom of the page there is some of the books I've written. And I actually co-wrote a book with my good friend who we come from university days, Pastor Wale Adenuga. Thank you for being here. We wrote a book together called One Lesson Learned. We actually kind of collated stories from people together. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about that, but that's just for you to know. But more importantly, let's talk about my career. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of my career, which will set the scene for what we're going to talk about today. So I started my career as a civil engineer. 1991, I graduated. We graduated together in Ife. And then after my youth service, I went back to Lagos, and I had this desire to be a writer. But I hadn't done anything in the writing space, so I went to work as an editor for an organization, and I did that for 6 months. And after that, we were part of the first group of people that jackpot. So I jackpot to, that's why you see the aeroplane there. I moved to the UK. And when I got to the UK, there were no jobs in engineering. And so the only job I could do was to work as a security guard. So I worked as a security guard. And I thought to myself that if I'm in this space working as a security guard, even though I did not understand it, because the only time I understood security guard was from Nigerian setting, so a megad, right? So I didn't understand that actually in the UK, security guard was actually a professional role. And so I had a career mentor who then began to teach me the principles of what it means to be a security guard. So simple things like the fact that you have to clock in and clock out, that you're not just sitting in one space. You have to go around certain points within the building. There's hierarchy within security. These are things I didn't even know. And so by working as a security guard, I made up my mind that I'm going to be the best security guard possible. And I began to do that. So I got promoted within being a security guard. And one day, while I was working, and this is one of the sudden changes I'm going to talk about later, while I was working as a security guard, I got tapped on the shoulder and I was told that your collar doesn't fit. So I was working in River Island at a store, and the manager said that they didn't want a black person to be on the door front as a security guard. And so I was kicked off. And when I went back to my office, my mentor, Amanda, she looked at me and said, "You're better than this. Look, you're intelligent, you have a degree. Go and look for another security company that will pay you more and give you better opportunities." And that was kind of one of my first changes that I experienced in my career. And then I moved to point number 5, if you're following on the slide. I moved to a company called Securicor, where I worked as a store detective. Like I was saying, even in security, there are levels, right? No matter which field you find yourself in, you need to understand the levels that are available. So within the security practice, there was clothes, uniform security, and plain clothes security. There was bodyguarding. There were different levels. And when I got to this organization, I began to rise through the ranks. Now, interestingly, one evening I was sitting down working on this, working in a care home. I'd been working there for about 18 hours, and I looked up, and there was a sign up there that said, "Positive action for Black and Caribbean, African and Caribbean graduates." So I thought to myself, I'm a graduate. Why don't I apply? So I applied. And I knew that when I applied for this job, there would be many other people that would have applied. And so I said to myself, how do I make myself stand out? And so at the bottom where they said any other information, I wrote, "I will give you 101% commitment." That's what I wrote at the bottom of it. And the deputy director, John Wilson, was so intrigued by somebody daring to write 101% commitment that he asked to see me. He wanted to interview me by himself. So brought me to the interview, we sat down, and as he sat down in the interview, he looked at me and said, I have so many questions here that I'm supposed to ask you for this job, but I'm not going to ask you any of those questions. What I'm going to ask you is, you spent the last 18 months of your life in security. I'm going to ask you this question. If you were going to secure the University of Manchester, how would you do it? And on the basis of your answer to that question, I will give you the job or not. And so I sat down, came out with some ideas that I think is a combination of James Harley Chase, James Bond. I combined it all together. And at the end of it, the guy walked away. I remember him standing by the door, and he said to me, "You talked about 5 things. Of those 5 things, I'm going to implement 3 of those on Monday. And you got the job." And so that's how I moved out of security into this graduate placement. Now, the graduate placement role, point number 6, was supposed to be a 1-year role, just for 1 year, and you then have to move on. But my boss liked me so much, and he said, "Where are you going to next?" I said, "I don't have anywhere to go to." He said, "Okay, you know what? Create a job for yourself. All the work you've done in the last 1 year, write it down in a job description, and then apply for the job." And so I came up with the idea of a technical clerk, point number 7 on the slide that you see over there. Point number 7, I came up with this idea of technical clerk, which was combining accounting with IT, and the job didn't exist before. I wrote the job description. 24 other people applied for that job. Went through the whole interview process, and thankfully, at the end of it, this is my job that I wrote, I got the job. The point I'm trying to make, and you will see I'm going to try and make these points all through the day, is that sometimes you are given an opportunity to transform your own life by writing your own job description. It's not often that it happens in your life, but for me, it's happened twice, where you write your own job description and actually you determine the direction of your flow. And by writing my own job description, I determined the kind of work I was going to do. And actually what happened then is By the end of 2 years, I got into a stage where I had taught myself programming, that I thought to myself, I can now go and apply for a programming job. So under the guise of technical clerk, I taught myself how to program. And for those who are programmers in the room, old age programming, I taught myself Visual Basic. But I taught myself in a way that was assisted Visual Basic, so VBA, not VB itself. And that meant that I wasn't actually, I'm in Nigeria, so I can say this. I wasn't a koro coder. I was by the side coder. But I went for this interview, and let me tell you this. And I don't like to boast, but I will boast at this point. By the time they finished the verbal interview, my boss's boss, Nick Galt, was like, you have got the job. There is, how much salary do you want? When are we going to relocate? I was living in Manchester. We're going to relocate you to Guildford. Everything is sorted. All you have to do now is take a technical test. And we are sure that you will walk over they say it's a matter of formality, routine. It's just something that we have to do to make sure that you are who you say you are. So they put me in a room to do the technical test, 10 questions. I look at the 10 questions. I could not answer one. You know why? Because I taught myself how to program, and they are writing this question in deep technical language, which I did not understand. So my boss comes in, Chris Harris, who later became one of my mentors. Chris Harris comes in, he's like excited. My boss, Nick, he's like, when are you going to start? What's going to happen? How are you getting on with the test? I don't know how to answer any of these questions. So he looks at me, and he goes to the whiteboard. He says, okay, you learned programming this way, but this question is answering the same question in a different way. So, how you would do a select table, right? You would just go and draw a table, but you have to write selected. So he literally coached me through every single question until the sixth question. And based on his coaching, I was able to get 6 out of 10. And the pass mark was 5.5. So, so I was able to enter into the company. Now, a week before, I'm just going to continue the story. A week before I started, he invited me down to travel down. Like, I was living in Manchester. The job was in Guildford, so it's a bit like from here to maybe Ife. So I traveled down, and he said, let me take you on a walk. So he took me on a walk. He said, after you left, we interviewed 4 more people, and the lowest they got was 9 out of 10. You and I know that you actually got 0. So, what guarantee do I have that you are going to be good for us? I said, look, I give you my word. Like, I will learn what needs to be learned. I will do what needs to be done. I'll make you proud. So I started, and I would honestly say I was the worst programmer they had ever hired in their history. Like, there were people that were programming from the age of 5, 10. There was a guy he had programmed the piano to do certain things. This is like back in the early 90s. He had programmed the piano to do certain things. And here I am, Johnny just come, VBA guy. So what I did was, and I think this is something to encourage you, is just learn. So when I finish work at 5 o'clock, I will eat, 6:30, I will start studying. I will study till 12 midnight. Wake up the next morning. Luckily, my family were up in the north. I was down in the south by myself. Anyway, long story short, 2 years later, I went to them and said, there's a lot in the middle, but by 2 years later, I went to them and said, I'm now bored. Because now I was their best programmer in 2 years. And you know why? I found a shortcut. See, all these programmers, they wanted to take the long cuts. They wanted to take the long way. I found out that there was something called graphical user interface. Back then, it was a brand new concept. Programmers were not even doing it. But because I was a lazy programmer, I wanted to find a shortcut. So I found this shortcut called graphical user interface. So I would go to my client and I would say, look, tell me in pictures how you want this application to be. I am not a good coder, but if you tell me in pictures, I will draw it out. So I started drawing out. So I said, okay, so when you press this button, what do you want it to do? I want it to open that page. Okay, so I started using what we now call stories and, pardon? User stories. Back then, nobody knew what it was called. We were just making it up as we went along. But now it's called user stories. So I was using user stories to gather information. And you know what happened? The first application I deployed was the first application that went live with no defect. Zero defect, because it was exactly what the people wanted. And by doing that, what then happened was my boss realized that the people liked me. Because I wasn't a great programmer, but I was a great people person. So if I was going to make another point, point number 2, understand what your strengths are. My strength was I could engage people. I could get what people needed and convert that into technical language. So I would do all the drawings and I would go back to the technical team. I say, guys, I've just come back from a client. They want X, Y, Z. They want, when they press this button, that page to open. When they press that button, that page to open. Can you program it? Yes. Program it. And so I became the interface, what we now call a business analyst. But I didn't know what it was. I was just making it up as I went along. So after 2 years, I resigned. Well, actually, before I resigned, I called Chris. I took Chris on a walk. Remember Chris that took me on a walk? After 2 years, I took Chris. I said, Chris, let's go for a walk. I took him through the same path that he took me. I said, Chris, been here 2 years, I'm bored. I've learned every language that needs to be learned. I've advanced. I've gone on special training. I've developed the biggest application that we have. I want something new. And he said, look, know where your heart is, know where your passion is, but before you take the next job, let me know. And let Nick know, because Nick really likes you. Anyway, long story short, I go for this interview with GlaxoSmithKline. When I'm with GlaxoSmithKline, guess who walks into the room? My supervisor. Not Chris, but another supervisor. So somebody, when I joined, was like 10 levels above me. We are now applying for the same job as a senior analyst programmer. And long story short, I got the job, got into GlaxoSmithKline, and I'm now on point 9. And I think I need to speed up to kind of get us through. So at point 9, I joined GlaxoSmithKline. And when I joined GlaxoSmithKline, I realized, hold on a second, wait, I've just got into this programming business, and now they're outsourcing. So this is the early 1997, thereabout. They were now outsourcing the jobs to India. So I was like, I can't stay a programmer. If I stay a programmer, I'm going to lose my job. So what did I do? I converted to a business analyst. Did that for 9 months. Then I realized India is now interested in becoming business analyst also. So I was like, okay, what bit of this IT journey would not be outsourced to India? Project management. So I was sitting there, and one of my colleagues, Louise, she turned to me and said, Shola, you like people, you care about people, you work in legal right now, why don't you move to HR? There's a job available, payroll manager, IT payroll manager. I think you can do it. That was it. That's how I got into HR. A friend, a colleague, a peer mentor said to me, you like people, you know technology, go and work in payroll. So I went to work in payroll. When I got to payroll, that's when I started doing project management. 9 months into the job, my boss came to me and said, I'm leaving the company. But there's a secret project I've been working on, an outsourcing project. So you guys, pro dev, you know what I'm talking about. It's an outsourcing project. And I've told my boss that you'll be perfect for the job. But the only question mark is that we have to double promote you. Because you can't do it on the level you are on. You have to be double promoted. So the question is whether his boss will agree to you being double promoted. His boss was a guy that once I was just having this Christmas moment where I had a download of ideas. At the time, his boss was 7 levels above me, had a download of ideas. I emailed them to him. He implemented 4 of those ideas. So his boss already knew that this guy has potential. So sometimes your most valuable asset is not exactly what you do now. It's what you do with the environment that you are in, right? So how do you leverage the environment you're in so that when you get to the opportunity, your good works have already gone ahead of you? And so because I had done good works, when they came to him and said, we need to double promote Shola, he said, why are you even asking the question? Do you not know he was the one that gave us that idea that we did for that project 6 months ago? And so delayed gratification sometimes is a good thing, because when it now came, instead of getting 1 promotion, I got double. And so by leading that project, I really understood what HR was about, and I did the full life cycle of HR. I moved to Philadelphia for a couple of weeks. I was going to Philadelphia, 2 weeks in Philadelphia, 1 week back in London, 2 weeks in Philadelphia, 2 weeks in Raleigh. And before you know it, I was now leading the team in Malaysia, I was leading the team in the Philippines, and I was getting into the life cycle of HR. Now, here's the interesting thing. I want you to understand something. When I got the job, I had very limited knowledge around HR. But do you know how I got the knowledge? I networked. I networked with the head of benefits. I networked with the head of reward. I networked with the head of learning. I networked with everybody that was important. And I would sit down with them and say, okay, tell me, what's important? How do you want to bring IT into your area of business? And they will tell me, they give me the long laundry list, boom, register in my head. So when I now went back to the project, I was able to talk intelligently. And before you know it, I was promoted to the program manager for this project. And I'm just telling you these stories to show you how life is not straightforward. It's a combination of twists and turns, but you need to take the opportunities that lie ahead of you, because it's those opportunities that transform into real reality. So I worked on this program, and I was working on an outsourcing project, and the team that I was working with came from a consulting organization. And when I was working with them for so long, they said to me, you think, you breathe, you act like a consultant. Why are you not a consultant? I was like, I've never thought of consulting. So he said, don't worry. We'll send you jobs to apply for. So he started sending me jobs. So I started applying, and before I knew it, Accenture liked my CV, and Accenture, so I applied to Accenture, they said no. 6 months later, they said, actually, we have a job that is perfect for you. We don't even have to interview you. But based on your work at GlaxoSmithKline, we want to hire you. Now, I'm going to tell you this bit. I don't normally talk about this bit, but when Accenture gave me the offer, I told them that I had, I can't remember, a month's notice that I had to give. I can't really remember, but there was a notice period. But then GSK said, we can't let you go until you finish the project, this outsourcing project. We want you to go live with the project. So I got the job in June, but the project was going live in September. Now, I'm saying this to say a point, right? The point is, if you are adding value, if your intention is adding value, they will create new rules to accommodate you. And so in the history of GlaxoSmithKline, they created a new rule that actually said, we know you have got a job, we know you should be able to, we should release you to go, but we are refusing to let you go until you go live with the project. And we will pay you to stay. And we are willing to pay Accenture for time lost. So in fact, they even said, Accenture then said, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't you allow us to hire him early, and then we send him back to you as a consultant? They said, no. It is better for us to take him on now, and then we will pay you a fee for his delayed start. Do you get what I'm saying? And so sometimes, when you are really adding value, even your employer doesn't want you to go, right? Because they know that you're bringing value. And they're like, there's no way, we cannot find anybody that can finish this project. So I finished the project on the 30th. We went live on the 1st of September, and then I started the job on the 3rd. Literally. It was almost like handshake, project is live, no issues, great, bye-bye. And I'm just saying that to kind of, I don't know where you are in your career journey. I don't know what is going on in your career journey, but I think you need to just think about, how can I make sure that I'm adding value? Because if you're adding value, you will be valued, right? So anyway, I worked for Accenture for 2 years. I'm not going to go too much into the story, but I worked with brands like Unilever, Nokia. I traveled the world again. And then, while I was at Accenture, I got headhunted to come and work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. PricewaterhouseCoopers had just sold Monday, a company, to IBM, and so they were refreshing their consultancy team. And I was employee number 3. And so while I was in Accenture, I was a deep specialist in Oracle products. I got to PwC, the whole thing opened up. I was now a specialist in 25 different applications. And I say this to kind of get you to understand that at this point in my career is where I changed from management to leadership. My mindset changed. That you're not just trying to manage projects or manage ideas, you're now trying to lead an organization. That was a big change for me, going from management to leadership. Because when you're leading, you're not just trying to manage tasks, you're actually leading people to a place of destiny. And so, and again, if you look at the slide, I tried to put the names of my mentors, because mentorship was key throughout this journey for me. And so, point 11, and I'm going to kind of then jump into more content. But point 11, when I was a senior manager, I was now going to become a director. And in PwC, you get asked to become. You don't apply. They invite you to apply. And so I was invited to apply, and in the invitation process, I'll tell you the truth, I failed. I failed the test. So when you are invited to apply, they give you a test. And the test is basically to understand whether your psyche is ready to move to directorship. And it's you spend like 48 hours in a boot camp. And at the end of my 48-hour boot camp, I failed. Like, I didn't fail small, though. I failed big. My coach called me, took me to the couch, sat me down, and said, Shola, there is no way on earth or in heaven that you will ever be a director. Like, he has never seen failure scores at this level. Like, normally people fail, they get 30% over 100. I was getting 14% over 100. Not only that, I already fought with the examiner because I told him that his methods were not working. And it's like, these methods have been in this company for over 100 years. Like, how can you just say that the method is not working? I say it's not working. Like, there's something wrong with the method. Now, I tell you this story to tell you this. My boss at the time was smart enough to realize I had a gap, that mentorship could close the gap. And so they gave me a mentor called Barry. Walk into Barry's office. Barry says to me, I hear that you are good. That's what I heard. They told me that you are good. But in this room, you have to prove how good you are. And actually, he reprogrammed my mind. So when I now went for my directorship exam, the final exam, because the one that I did before was like a pre-test. It doesn't even count. But when I went for my final exam, I got the highest score in the whole of the UK. So the guy that got 14%, I now got 100. So it's normally over 100. Most people don't get 100. Like the highest people get is 98. They scored me 105%. First time ever. The chief people officer called me. Said, normally I don't call people when the results are out, but I have to call you because you have broken a record. It has never been done, particularly not by a black person. Right? And actually, they were like, we have to fast track you to partner. That's the outcome of your directorship is that we need to fast track you to partner. Because your revenue levels, there's a consultant in the room, you know what I mean? Like your revenue levels are above target, your stakeholder management above target, your interaction with the team above target. So, in fact, in my directorship exam, the examiner, you have 3 examiners, the examiner stopped the interview and said, I think there is a problem in this exam. I said, what's the problem? He said, are you applying for directorship or you're applying for partnership? Because your stats read as if you're already a director. Now, I want you to understand that almost 18 months before that, before I got my mentor, I scored 14%. Now I'm outscoring it. So that's the power of mentorship. So people don't realize why I'm so passionate about mentorship. If you get the right mentor, they can make you go from 14%. That's a 100% increase, right? Or whatever, I don't know what the right maths, right? I was at 14%, but actually when my result came out, I was 114%. That's the power of mentorship. That's why I'm passionate about it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is to kind of sow some seed in people's minds, to get you to know and understand what your future could actually look like. Whew, okay. And so I became a director, and I won't bore you with that story. Long story short, I parted ways with PwC, and I went to work for a startup called Deliveroo. And that began a whole different world for me. And just interesting, I worked for Deliveroo between 2017 and 2019. Deloitte published that Deliveroo in 2017 to 2019 grew by 100,000%. So I was in the middle of 100,000% growth. Like we were doing stuff that takes 5 years. We were doing it in 3 months. We were knocking out global policies all over the world. And I had my team, the oldest member of my team, my head of technology was 24 years old. I had a 24-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old. We were knocking things out of the park, right? And I say that to say, sometimes you just need to transition from where you are to where you're supposed to be, and then you begin to shine, right? So in PwC, I was one of the crowds. In Deliveroo, I was given the opportunity to lead and open my eyes to the whole startup world and how things could move very quickly, how you could deploy 23 policies in 13 countries in 5 months. Like, when I say policy deployment, I'm not talking about the idea of a policy. I'm talking about actual policy deployment in 23 countries in 5 months. When I was at HSBC, it took us 19 months to deploy one policy. 19. I had 121 stakeholders around the world deploying a project, deploying a policy around position management. So when you go from that to a situation where you are deploying over 23 policies in 4 or 5 months, your brain is moving to a whole different level. And so while I was doing that, I got headhunted by Prosus Naspers, where I went in as a senior director, eventually left as a VP, and now I work for myself. And I'll pick up the rest of that story as we go along. So, hope that gives you a bit of context from who I am and where I'm coming from. So let's talk about sudden change. Because as you can see on my journey, there were lots of changes. But sudden change can be defined as happening or occurring quickly, something that just happens without prior warning or indication. It just happens to you. Sorry. Sudden change in a career journey is like a change in trajectory. And if you've listened to my story, you can see that there were many changes. I went from programmer to business analyst to project manager to consultant to in-house head of people operations to, VP in a different organization. And so when you have these kind of shifts, it's how you prepare before the shift that is very important. This type of change can be prompted by various factors, and we'll talk about a few of them in a minute. It could be sudden layoff, it could be termination, it could be change in personal circumstances, it could be new challenges that you're looking for, it could be an opportunity that changes, it could be the job market that changes. Like, I think I was talking to Queen earlier. If you're a React programmer, what you were doing last year is not what you're doing this year because of OpenAI. AI has changed everything. The whole world has changed. If you were a digital marketer 2 years ago, what you're doing now, I can tell you the name of an AI that can do what you're doing. Right? And so there's always this constant shift in the marketplace that you have to kind of be aware of. And some of them are not forced. They're not forced by you. They just happen because the industry is changing. Right? However, a sudden change can lead to you having new skills, learning new job functions, doing something different. I think I've skipped a slide. Oh, no, maybe not. Okay, here it is. So, however, sudden change can lead to unexpected personal growth, personal development, can create new passions, new interests, even give you a completely different career path. So sudden change is not all bad. It's how you react to sudden change that's important. So I'm just going to throw these out there and kind of skip through it very quickly. So sudden change, I read this book by Tim Grove. He talked about when COVID happened, that the NBA went through a huge transformation. Because the NBA players, so if you NBA as in basketball players, they had built their careers based on noise. So when you're about to score a hoop, you needed the crowd to be shouting. And now NBA players were playing with no crowds. And the performance of some of the NBA players actually dipped. Same player. The thing that had changed was the environment had changed. They were no more in a noisy, oh, go, go, go. And the coaches had to adapt to that because that was a global change. So COVID brought change. And in the book Winning, Tim Grove talks about this change and how he, as a coach, had to change his coaching practices to coach his players to go into COVID. And then when COVID was over, now they got used to that. Their mind had got used to playing quietly and just focusing. And now when they got into a noisy environment again, they couldn't play again. So NBA players who are paid phenomenal amount of money, when change happened to them, they dipped in their performance. How about you and I? They were just trying to be the best at what we can be. So change would cause all sorts of changes. Change will cause a bit of distortion in what you're doing. Large changes could be global recession, right? I don't even have to say much, right? We're in Nigeria. We know what's going on, right? Or your CEO might exit. So the last company I worked with, they sacked the CEO overnight. Everything changes. Because when you have a new CEO, you are guaranteed to have a new strategy. You are guaranteed to have a new direction. It's guaranteed. It's not a prayer point. It's going to happen, right? Your company might run out of funding. You might be like, we have the greatest idea ever, but all of a sudden you run out of funding. That's a sudden change. What can you do about it? Or the product that your company produces, all of a sudden just accelerates, right? That everybody now wants this product, so you are in hyper growth mode. And that's what happened during COVID. I mean, there's so many stories during COVID, but the delivery business during COVID went into hyper growth mode. Hyper growth, right? And then when COVID finished, what happened? It dipped. So sudden change could also come from, personal sudden changes. You might get promoted unexpectedly. You might get demoted. Hopefully not, but it does happen. Happened to me. I got demoted. Story for another day. I didn't get less pay, but they just demoted my position. You might get redundant. That happened to me last year. Your boss might decide to leave. If your boss leaves all the stakeholder management that you've done, all the personal, what do you call it? Personal, what's the word for it? Social equity that you've built up with your boss is now gone. You have to now start afresh. This boss that was saying I will get promoted in 2 months' time, now he has gone. I have to now start all over again. Right? You might decide, your company might decide that your department has to merge with another department. Your company might decide that actually we are closing this office, we're relocating you all to Spain. That actually happened in Nigeria. There was a company, they were in this office here, and they recruited them all to Spain. So, so these are just changes that can happen. Right? Some more. You might have some personal external changes. You might all of a sudden have a brother or a sister come stay with you. Right? It changes your financial dynamics. You might become empty nesters, like me. You might adopt, you might relocate, your spouse might relocate, or there might be a relationship change, right? So, and this slide I put up just to kind of make our minds really think about sudden change, right? PwC put out at the end of last year that the Naira was devalued by 98% in 6 months. That's sudden change, unexpected. I came into Lagos last Friday, not this one, the one before. When I came in, dollar was 1,400. Today, dollar is about 1,600 in less than 2 weeks. Right? That's what we're dealing with. That's the level of sudden change that we're dealing with. And then, of course, sudden change, you have to address the concept of Japa, the Japa syndrome. And we're trying to find a word. Some of us, some people like me, we're trying to find a word of Jakpada. Jakpa, we are now looking at a word for those who are Jakpadaing, because there's going to be that change, right? The greatest economic growth, defined not by me, but by the World Economic Forum, the greatest economic growth in the next 50 years is on the continent of Africa. It's the only place in the world, apart from Colombia or Peru, that has the ability to grow. Every other place is at saturation level. So, the Jakpas might have to Jakpada. All right. So, let's take some lessons from my life. And I'll try and make this quick, because when I was doing my introduction, I kind of started talking about some of these things. Right? So, I kind of put it in 3 parts, right? The change that happened, the impact, and the result. So, one of the first changes I went through was that my fiance, who is my wife now, she moved from Nigeria to the UK. And so I followed her. And in following her, a civil engineering degree holder got to the UK. There were no jobs for me. And so I could either say, I have to work as a civil engineer, or else I'm not going to work. Or I say, I need to eat. So I worked as a security guard. I've told you the story already, but that's what I'm saying. So I had to change my career because it was needed. And then a new career path kind of opened up from there. Give you another example. I talked about this already. I was reassigned based on racial grounds. So I leveraged my job mentor. Amanda told me, you're better than this. Go out there, get a new job, get better pay. Right? It's just another example of sudden change that happens to you. Because, okay, here's this. So the company started outsourcing. So some of these I've already told you. The company started outsourcing to India. I refined my career path, leveraged my peer coach. Louise was my peer coach. I leveraged her, grew in confidence, and I began to mentor others, right? That was the result. Next one. So this one is an interesting one. I was working on a project in Manchester, and I was flown in, if you like. I was FedExed in as an external consultant to come and repair damage that was already on the ground. So I was already going into a damaged situation. But when I got into the damaged situation, it was a project between the police and the council. But the funding, anyway, long story, they did not agree between themselves. So the project was going to derail because of that. We now went to a project board meeting. When we got to the project board meeting, they threw me under the bus. You know when somebody throws you under the bus, and then they drive the train over it? They threw me under the bus. I can even say that they lied. But the point of the matter was that the chairperson of the board looked at me and said to me, Shola, you are the weakest link. You are fired. She fired me on the spot. No explanation, nothing. So I went home. They sent a partner from the firm to go and do investigation. The guy did 12 hours of investigation. He was on the phone to me. He was like, Shola, you need to come back. I was like, why? Kata kata don't bust, right? What is he saying? He was saying that they didn't realize how deep in trouble the project was and how I was already beginning to bring it back on track. I said, no, the client fired me. I'm not coming back. He said, the client asked us to beg you to come back. I said, okay, I'll come back on 2 conditions. Condition number 1, the client themselves pick up the phone and call me to apologize. And then number 2, I'm only giving you 2 days. I'll come in, redo the plan, and I'm out. Right? But now, the result of that was self-control. The impact was that because I had self-control, the client realized their own mistake, even before I could even point it out. And sometimes you need resilience, you need strength of character, and if you do that, what would happen as a result? You get what I got, a recall. They were like, please, you have to come back. I said, but you fired me on the spot. You told me I was the weakest link. They said, no, we misunderstood. And again, I go back to the point that if you add value, even at a moment of injustice, your value will be realized, right? Anyway, so my line manager resigns. I think I told you about this, where I got double promotion. I got a role overseas, and that role eventually led to my greatest career pivot in my life, where I went from working in-house to becoming a consultant, right? And so sudden change is not always negative. It's just how you manage that change and get the results that you need. Here's a bit of a longer one. So I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers. My boss and I, after I became a director, my boss and I, we had some challenges. Let's put it like that. And he wanted me out. And so he went to HR and he said, please, can you fire him? And HR said, it's not possible to fire him. The reason being, last year, he got the best result of any promotion we've seen from senior manager to director. So you have to go and manage the problem. And so he gave me a product that had never sold for 5 years. Nobody had sold this product. It was almost like a poison chalice. But I went in, found a customer, they signed. I sold about 300,000 worth of business, and I had a pipeline of 10 million. And so all of a sudden, a dead product became alive. And the board was like, who said this product was dead? It was my boss. He said, okay, you need to beef up that department. But in beefing up the department, he pushed me out. Or he brought somebody to be my boss. And so I said, you know what? I have not suffered this much to stay here, so I'm going. So I resigned. Well, yeah, I resigned, actually. And when I resigned, you have 6 months' notice. And so you're supposed to wait for 6 months. After 1 month, my boss came to me and said, sir, well, let me use the word you use, uncle. You are causing too much. People are stressed that you are leaving. So please, leave now. I will pay you to go. No non-disclosure, no non-competes. I will pay you full 6 months salary, just go. And literally the next day I walked into another job. Literally. So, sorry for another day. But the point I wanted to make was the impact was, when this thing first happened to me, I became very defensive. I even became combative because I was like, this is an injustice. What you're trying to do is... And then it was escalated to the chairman of the UK board. And the chairman of the UK board gave me a different perspective. When he gave me a different perspective, I went to my coach, my mentor. He helped me understand certain things. And then he said, look, leverage your network. You've done good work. Literally, I finished work on the 31st of August. On the 2nd of September, my client at HSBC called me and said, Shola, we have a problem. You solved it for us in this company. Can you come and solve it for us here? I was like, well, I am not under any consulting umbrella anymore. So it doesn't matter. Come as you are. So she hired me she said, come in on Monday, we'll talk about it. Went in on Monday, she put a piece of paper in front of me, said, okay, draw up the strategy. I drew up the strategy. Said, can you just start tomorrow? So that's how I started, working in Deliveroo. So I tell these stories to kind of make you understand that sometimes you have to chart your own course to where you need to get to. All right. I think this is the last one. Okay, so somewhere in my journey, unfortunately, we lost a child. And after my first son, my wife was pregnant, and we had a stillbirth. And I was kind of in a trajectory in my career that I thought, even though I've lost a child, I need to go to work. I need to work. I need to kind of be working. I can't afford to lose a job because I've lost a child. And so I go to the office, and my boss says to me at the time, well, actually, it wasn't my boss. It was my boss's boss. He said to me, why were you not in the office yesterday? I said, we lost a child. And he was like, well, you'll not be the first, you'll not be the last. I beg, deliver what's in front of you. We need to get it done. And it's, when something hits you, like, have I lost my way? Have I lost track? Am I wrong? And the result of that is that I resolved to prioritize my family. I realized that actually, no matter how important your career is, family trumps career. Right? I'm a career person. I love career. I love what I do, but my family became the most important thing to me. And it was because of that experience. Because I realized in the face of my greatest loss as a human being, losing a child, my boss's attention was focused just on the projects I was delivering. And so I realized that actually, if I don't prioritize family, nobody would. And so that's when I became an advocate for a balanced work life and making sure that we advocated for it and mentor and influence other people. So you understand that, yes, career is important. You can shoot for the star. You can shoot for the moon. But at the end of the day, your family trumps career. Because when your career is gone, who will be there waiting for you? Family. So it was a sudden change. And actually, it was me understanding. Actually, probably one of the things that pushed me into HR to realize that, no, that should not be an experience of an employee with a manager having gone through that kind of a loss. So let's look at the life of Joseph. And I like using Joseph from the Bible because he gives us some understanding about what you do in the midst of sudden change, right? So the story of Joseph can be found in the Bible. It's a Christian concept in the Christian Bible from Genesis 37 to Genesis 50. And it tells us the story of Joseph. But I'm just going to summarize it in a quick slide and give a concept. So the story starts with Joseph having a dream that his brothers are going to bow down to him, but his brothers didn't like that dream, so they sold him into slavery. As a slave, he was taken to Potiphar's house, and the slave becomes the master in his master's house. His master's wife liked him, so she tried to get him to sleep with her. He refused, and then she put him in prison. Basically, while he's in prison, he interprets some dreams, and then one of the dreams he interpreted was for the butler, and the butler said to the butler, when you get to this new place of authority, remember me. Luckily, 2 years later, as the Bible will tell us, he did remember him. And then I put at the end there, because he remembered him, Pharaoh made him the CEO of the first emerging company. You'll understand that in a second. Because Joseph was made the chief operating officer of Egypt to do something that had never been done on the face of the earth, which is to preserve food for 14 years because of the famine. And in doing that, we see Joseph manage sudden change in a very interesting way. And I just break this down into two parts. First part, the first 7 years, Joseph had to come up with people who were storing food. It wasn't required before. Nobody had to store food. Nobody was expecting a famine, but Joseph had to come up with that idea. He had to get builders and architects to build stores to store food for 14 years. It wasn't required before. He was managing the change very well. Then he had to have inventory, because all of a sudden he had to know in the first 7 years of plenty, was he going to have enough food that would last them for the next 7 years of less. Then he had to have facility managers, people to manage those facilities. He had to have a strategy department to say, okay, how are we going to store the food? Where are we going to store the food? How are we going to store the food? And when people want to buy the food, how are we going to sell it to them? Right? Then he had to begin to prepare a sales team. Because in the year of plenty, everybody's eating and drinking. Nobody's expecting there to be 7 years of famine. And then he had, of course, in my view, he had to have some data analysts to analyze the data. Do we have enough food that's going to last us for the next 7 years? Because that was his job. His job was get us through the next 14 years. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of lack. Your job is to deliver on that. And I give you all power. Pharaoh said to him, I give you all power. Apart from me, apart from my family, anything on this earth, you are in charge. Here's my signet ring. And so I like to say that this was the first startup in the Bible. The first startup. Because you can't go and look at a pattern. There was no pattern. Nobody had done it before. And so this next 7 years, he had to create these teams. The sales team that actually sold the food. The bankers who now had to bank all the money that was coming in because people had to buy food in the 7 years. He had to find investors. Imagine he now had all this naira coming in because everybody wanted food. They wanted to buy cassava. They wanted to buy whatever was available they were willing to buy. And when money ran out, guess what? They started selling their land. They sold their land. They sold their houses. They sold their cattle. They sold anything they had. So you had to have property managers, right? And once you become the sole source of money, people now start pointing to you. Corporate social responsibility. You have to take care of the people. Ideas for the people, by the people, right? And then, of course, the accounting level, the level of financial accounting would have gone through the roof. Because now you're dealing with assets, you're dealing with financial structures, commercial structures, which they wouldn't have had to do before. Everybody was just reporting to Pharaoh. Now it was a little bit different. And then finally, as the Bible tells us, he actually had to create land managers because people were willing to give up their land for food. I pray that we never get to that stage in Nigeria where you are happy to just give land. Like, take my land, just give me food to eat. That's how bad it was. Now, I give this example because I think Joseph is a great example of a disruptor who managed change very, very well and came up with ideas. Which school did he go to? Harvard? Yale? No, he went to the School of Life. He took all the lessons he had learned on his journey and began to apply them when they were required. I asked you a question. I always put this slide up to ask this question. What are you learning today that's going to be of value tomorrow? Learn it well. Because when training is over, reality sets in. And you can't go back and relearn. You can't go back and rehash. So what are you learning today that is going to be of value tomorrow? Because that's what Joseph did. Whatever he learned in prison, whatever he learned in Potiphar's house, when he became the CEO of Egypt, he just put it into practice. Now, here's an interesting thing. The only thing you can truly control in any change or disruption is your attitude and your reaction. That's all you can change. If dollar decides to fall to 1 to 3,000, you can't, there's nobody in this room that has power to change that outcome. But what you have control over is your reaction to the change. What is your attitude going to be when your boss comes in and says, you are now promoted, you are now taking on a big new role? What's your attitude going to be? What's your reaction going to be when you're told, yes, you're in charge of this department, but hey, we found this new, amazing, young, millennial, Gen Z that is hitting it out of the park, influencer, they're not going to be your boss. What do you do then? You can't do anything about the change. But your reaction and your attitude is the one thing that you can control. My question is, how in control of your reaction to change, and how in control are you of your attitude in that change? Because remember, we're talking about sudden change. We're not talking about planned change. Something that just happens suddenly that you have no control over. Think about this. What makes you you? What is your calling? What is if I wake you up in the middle of the night, what comes out of your mouth? What motivates you? What rewards do you expect? Like really, really, truly, truly, what do you really expect? When you do a good job, what are you really expecting? And we don't take time to think about those things. We don't take time to think about what rewards do I really, really want. You see, I'm lucky that I've been through different stages in my career, that right now, the rewards I really want is to see that I'm impacting other people. Money is not a driver, promotion is not a driver, I now work for myself. So it's really about impact. But that's not going to be true for everybody. You just have to know where you are. When I had 3 kids in school, money was the reward I was looking for. And I would do anything to make sure that the money came, so I can pay the fees that needed to be paid. Even if that meant I had to get a second job, even if that meant I had to shut up when a junior person that is not as experienced as me is now my boss, I just zip it. But if I don't have that burden, if a junior person that is not as clever as me, I can have a conversation. You understand? So understanding your time is very important. Understanding where you are on your journey, understanding where you are in your career is very important. What defines you? If I ask your spouse, I ask your children, I ask your parents, my dad is here, like I said, how would he define you? How will you define yourself? What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that you see? And why do you do what you do? Right? I know ultimately we do what we do because of money. Okay, fine. But ultimately, why do you do what you do? What do you want them to write when you're gone? What's the legacy that you're leaving behind? What impact do you want to have? Oh, sorry. I love this. This is like, I'm going to make some book recommendations later, but this is a great book. One of the most profound books I've read about career and being resilient. This book was written by Tim Grove. It's called The Unforgiving Race to Greatness. The book is called Winning. And in the book, Tim says this: fear shows up on its own. Fear doesn't need an invitation. Fear just shows up. You don't need to invite fear. Fear just shows up. Doubt has to be invited. You invite doubt. Can I do it? Can I not do it? But fear just shows up. Doubt has to be invited. You have to say, you know what, I don't think I'm the right person for this job, or then you start doubting yourself, right? Fear heightens your awareness. It makes you alert. Fear makes you think, oh my gosh, like I'm about to do a presentation, am I ready? So fear heightens your awareness, makes you think about yourself. Like even before I came out and presented, I went into the green room there, and I sat down for like 2 minutes, just kind of center yourself, understand like, okay, I'm about to present. Fear heightens, but doubt is the opposite. Like doubt is the opposite to fear. Doubt that you invited in by yourself, it slows you down and paralyzes your thinking. Doubt paralyzes your thinking. You can't think of a solution. If I doubt my ability to present what I'm presenting now, doubt will begin to creep in. My voice will actually slow down. My confidence level will reduce, because that's what doubt does. And Tim was trying to say, use fear to heighten your awareness, like fear of losing your job maybe makes you more conscientious, or fear of your startup not succeeding makes you more focused. But doubt is the opposite, so you need to eliminate doubt. There's a speaker in the Christian circles that said this statement. He said, learn to doubt your doubts, and you will never be a doubter anymore. You get it? Learn to doubt your own doubts. When doubt comes and it shows up and says, I doubt whether you can do that, just doubt it. If you learn to doubt your doubts, you will never be a doubter anymore, because you will eliminate doubt. Mathematical equation. So let's talk about it. On this road, right? We're ultimately talking about becoming top achievers, people that achieve something that is of value. And to do that, it depends on your definition of what a top achiever is. Everybody has a different definition. Because your definition leads to your work ethic. What is a top performer? Some people think a top performer is 9 to 5. As long as you're going to work from 9 to 5 o'clock, you clock out as you have done what the contract has asked you to do. Unless there's a small clause, HR, they put a small clause. You will work whatever hours the job requires you to work, right? So being a top achiever really depends on how you define a top achiever. It depends on your own personal work ethic and your theology of work. What is work? And don't worry, I'm not going to try and do that today. We don't have time. But think about it. What does work mean to you? The third box is the impact of coaches and mentors on your life. How are coaches and mentors helping you to achieve what you need to achieve? And then finally, to really be a top achiever, you have to have a sense of intentionality. What is the level of your intentionality to really be a top performer? And I think I'm a bit over time, but great. I think I did it. Break time. Yes. So we're just going to have like a quick 5-minute break and take any questions so far before we go into the second part. All right. So you can stretch your legs, have a quick comfort break, drink the water we gave you or whatever. But also, if you have a question, just raise your hand. We have a mic. And yeah, any questions so far? Yeah? You want to ask a question? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that you asked.
Okay.
Yeah, so, how do you define a top achiever?
How do you define a top achiever?
Yes.
How do you define a top achiever? I think it's a complex question. Like I said, ultimately, it depends on the framework in which you're defining it, right? So you have to understand yourself, your capability, your ability, and then you set the boundary of what a top achiever is. Now, that's step one. Step two is maybe the organization you're working for, the community you are in, the people that surround you might have a different definition. The question is, whose definition do you want to go by? And I say this to say this. I got a third class from Ife. So to all intents and purposes, everything I've achieved in my life should not be possible. Right? If you get a third class degree, doesn't matter whether you got it from Harvard, third class degree, and particularly in Nigeria, let's forget about where I came from. A third class degree, people don't expect anything from you. In fact, they will encourage you to go and do a master's to repair the damage that you have done to yourself. Right? Now, I refuse to allow the result that I came out with to define who I am. And so therefore, I define myself as a top achiever, even though I had a third class degree. Because it's not what I got, it's what I did with it. Do you understand? So, to all intents and purposes, I was not a top achiever. If they're calling back alumni that did really well, that they want to showcase their result, my results will not be there. Right? But, again, it doesn't really matter because I'm not an engineer. So, it doesn't matter. What I did was take what I learned, converted it, and here I am today. And I think, trying to think, when last did anybody even ask if I was a graduate? Forget about what I graduated in and what I got. that they even ask, did you graduate? I think, I don't want to exaggerate, but maybe 20 years ago, in an interview that they ask you, what did you study, what did you get? Nah. Because you've made up for that by your work ethic, right? Because your third-class degree is a piece of paper that you can choose to let it define you and become your K-leg throughout your life, or just put it as a sideshow to who you really are. Does that answer your question? All right. Yes? Thank you.
Good evening. So, in one of the points you made, transitioning from where you are to where you're supposed to be, you mentioned a question of thoughts. How do I know I'm making the right choice? So, I just want to ask you, how did you know you're making the right choice? And what advice would you give for someone just starting their career?
So it's a very good question. And I know I'm probably going to overemphasize this point. I've been trying to emphasize it, but I'll overemphasize it now. Mentorship is one of the most powerful ways that I realized I was making the right decision. Right? Sorry, 1 second. Finding a mentor to invest time in you that can sit down with you, talk with you, help you analyze where you're trying to go, and challenge you in that was one of the ways I was able to navigate. And if you look at this, if I show you, when I send the slides out, you look back again, almost every career change I had a mentor. Somebody who I went to, we had a conversation. Doesn't mean that you always agree with your mentor, doesn't mean they're the best in the world, but they give you enough insight to help you understand that what you're about to do is very, very good. Or it's going to be good, right? So I would say how I knew, and I can only use my personal example, is I use mentorship and coaching to, I always, since I've been in the marketplace, I've always had a mentor. Not the same person, different people, depending on where I am, what I'm doing, but having that person that you can go to. Like I said, I transitioned into HR because a peer mentor, just a colleague, we're on the same level, earning about the same salary, but she saw me. That's what a mentor does. They see you, they see the value you can bring, and do what? What do? They increase your potential. So that's it. I take one more question. Oh, 2. Okay. Yes. Oh, 3. Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Okay, 2 questions.
Yes. One, can I meet Barry?
Can you meet Barry? Potentially, yes.
Okay, second question, and very real now. So you hear of things like mid-career crisis?
Yeah.
And did you ever have something like this? I know the place of having a mentor that you can even have a conversation with. Maybe I'm already answering my own question, but yeah, did you ever go through this through your journey?
I wouldn't say I had a specific mid-career crisis, but I think sometimes along my journey, right, remember, a lot of the spaces I was playing in, I didn't have any knowledge of what I was playing in. And so sometimes doubt comes in, and self-doubt. But again, like you said, even as you're asking the question, you take it to your mentor, and they kind of make you make sense of it. That, okay, yes, you were, okay, give you a good example. So when I first met senior manager, I had 2 mentors, Laura and somebody else. And Laura was a very good mentor. But she was so senior that I rarely had enough time with her. But the moments I did have with her were very, very vital and life transforming, actually. And I'm still in touch with her now, even though she's not my mentor anymore, but we're still in touch. She still coaches me. And I became a senior manager. I brought in and I'm saying this to make you understand, like a normal senior manager would bring in revenue of about 500,000. In my first year as a senior manager, I brought in 2.5 million. That's director level. So I got arrogant that I'm ready for directorship. Where is the directorship? So I pushed myself forward. And they were like, excuse me, nobody pushes themselves forward for directorship. You are called, and we haven't called you. Go and sit down. I was so annoyed. You know when you were vexed? I don't know whether you've ever been vexed before. I was so vexed. I pushed my way into Laura's office, sat down. I said, Laura, can you imagine, after the 2.5 million that I made, that nobody wants to push me forward for director? And she looked at me squarely in the eye. She said, what does it matter when you become a director? Our ultimate game for you is to become a partner. Think long term. Think long term. That was it. So in the middle of it, I slowed down and started thinking long term. Never looked at my career again from that moment in short term. She said, think long term. Don't just think about the next promotion. Think about where you're ultimately going. Me, I'm telling you, ultimately where we want to take you is partnership. So me and you will be colleagues. That's where I'm taking you. So what does it matter when you get a director if the ultimate end game is partnership? Next question. And I'll try and answer them faster.
All right. So first of all, I have two questions. So the first one will be, what do you do in the case whereby you want to, like for me, I studied accounting. I wanted to shift into something else, which was more like media, sound, and stuff like that. But my brothers and some people were like, oh, there's no career future in that. But that's what my interest was in. And then they had their own idea of, oh, I think you should do this instead. So at that kind of junction, how do you find a balance, or how do you even know, oh, which one should I go for at that point?
Yeah.
Do you get? So the second question would be, whenever you're going, since we're in a Christian body like that, I think my question would be, because I know you didn't really mention it so far so good, was what was your relationship with God at that point whereby you wanted to make that decision? That how did you handle it? Like
okay.
that? Yeah.
So let me take your first question first. So your first question is around when there are so many voices around you, right? There will always be voices around you that will be telling you this is the better way to go. So the key again, and I'm not trying to be cliche, the key again is know the voices around you, and the voice of your mentor, if you choose the right mentor, should be the loudest, right? Because everybody will have a point of view. Even you will have a point of view about where you're going, what you're doing. But your mentor is somebody who's supposed to, he's not God, he's not God's junior brother, but he's somebody that can help you, guide you, because they've been there. So that's why when you're choosing a mentor, you try and choose somebody who's been to where you're trying to get to. So they're showing you how to get to where they've got to, right? So for example, if somebody came to me, I studied something, but I want to do something different, I can tell them from my life history, I studied something different, I am now somewhere different. Here are the things I had to do. So for you to be able to navigate this. And to the point is, I always say this to people, understand what feeds you and understand what your passion is. So if your passion is not ready to start feeding you, oh boy, wake up. You will hunger. Right? So I'm a civil engineer, but I needed to eat, so I worked as a security guard. It's not my passion. It's not what I want to do, but I had bills to pay. So when you understand what feeds you and you understand what your passion is, you can separate the two. And sometimes you need to put passion on hold so you can pay bills. But ultimately, again, if you take Laura's advice, if you're thinking long term, it doesn't matter that I'm not working as a publisher today, because who knew that in 20 years from the point I wanted to be a publisher, that I would have published 7 books, right? So my passion, which is like my side hustle, is now easier to fulfill because I have a good career that can feed me and also feed my passion, right? And to your second question, where does God come into, or faith or religion? It comes into it, like I say to people, God is not going to speak louder because you're in the middle of a sudden change. God will speak to you as He's always been speaking to you, gently. Right? So, however you are used to your spiritual mindset, and for me, your spiritual awareness of God and God's direction for your life, is that when you're going through a sudden change, you need to make sure that the voice of God is aligned to the voice in which you're trying to go to. That's the way I do it. Last question, and we'll move to the next section. So, because I want us to be to finish by 6:30. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I had my first question you just answered now.
Okay.
But I want to really appreciate the fact that you made known to us your story.
Yeah.
Because when I was working in my previous company as a video editor, living in life, trying to follow my passion, I had a lot of advice because usually I hear a lot of people say things like I've been in this career for the past 15 years, 20 years. It looks nice, but then hearing you for the very first time, having multiple career paths, and then you succeeded, has really strengthened me in my own paths as I'm moving along, right? Okay. And now, my question now is in this line. Now that you have a calling, that you know something that it looks like is your passion, and then you know what feeds you, and then while you're trying to work on your passion, while you can switch along the while, how do you manage your time if what feeds you takes a lot of your time? Sometimes we have works like that takes a whole day. How do you manage the time to see that you're still preparing for your calling until your passion can now feed you?
So that's a very difficult question. Basically, the question is, how do you manage time? That's a story for another day. We can do another workshop on time management. But let me summarize it. I wrote an article on LinkedIn. Maybe you can go and find it. I talked about leadership, and kind of one of the things I talked about there was time management. Now, here's what you have to understand, right? When I was working security, I want you to understand this. When I was working security, generally my shifts were 16-hour shifts. So 24 hours in a day. And I'm working Monday to Saturday, 16-hour shifts. So I have 8 hours to sleep, refresh, study, right? Because then I went to do an editing course. I was trying to learn more about publishing and writing. So I was doing an editing course. So what I learned to do, now what I'm saying is for me, like you have to understand your own pathway. For me, I learned how to sleep for 4 hours. 4 hours. The remaining 4 hours, eat, study, do what you need to do, right? What I'm saying that when your passion is strong enough, it will create a hunger in you to create time, to give time to your passion. Give you an example. When I was working for GSK, I was always flying everywhere. So I was thinking, okay, how do I use the dead time on the plane? I was flying London to Philadelphia, 7 hours. I was flying every 2 weeks. So I started writing on the plane. I started writing books on the plane. It's like, okay, I have 7 hours. I can either watch movies or I can write. So I started writing, I started editing on the plane. And so it's really about looking at your lifestyle and how can you fit it in. How do you feed your passion when you have 3 children under 5? How do you do that? You've got to find the time. You've got to make the time. If you can't read books, listen to an audio book. Like, you've got to just find a way to, water always finds its level. Like, no matter where you put water will find a way out. It will just keep sipping. Whether it's under a hole or he will find a way out. So your passion will always find you to a place of fulfillment. If it's really your passion. Because a lot of us say something is a passion, but it's not actually a passion. It's just a bypass. It's not really a passion. But if it's a passion, it will keep feeding you. Passions they're like a train that's moving. They need you to put in coal, so you keep moving. If you stop putting coal, passion dies. Right? In the startup world, you're in the startup world. You see people come up with an idea, this idea is going to become a unicorn. A lie. After next week, you see them again. I pivoted. Because it wasn't really a passion, it was just like opportunity. I say Yoruba word, I know we're not all Yoruba, but EJ, that kind of thing. Like, maybe this one, maybe that one. Like, it's not really a passion. When you have a passion, hey, you are like focused. I don't have the time, but I'll find the time. Okay, so because of time, and I'm passionate about letting you go on time, let's skip to the next section. So this next section is taking all those stories that I talked about earlier, and let's try and boil them down into 7 principles. I call them 7 key elements to thrive in sudden change. So this next section is just looking at these 7 elements. But let me go through them one by one. Number 1, know what you have in your hand. Number 2, leverage the power of your network. Number 3, end game mindset. Like Laura said, think long term. Number 4, what time is it on your career timeline? What is the time on your career timeline? Number 5, resilience and grit. Number 6, don't worry, if you registered for this, we're going to email you the slides, right? So you don't have to try and take notes. Number 6, what do you see ahead of you? Which is very different from end game mindset, and I'll explain that. And then finally, the impact of mentors and coaches in your life. So let's go to number 1, like 7 things, so you know where we're going. Number 1, know what you have in your hand. Take a personal assessment of yourself. Do an inventory. Where am I right now? What education do I have? What experience do I have? What current skills do I have? What future skills am I trying to develop? Do an evaluation of yourself. I don't care which methodology you want to use, whether you want to use SWOT analysis, whether you want to do reveal my character analysis. Just know yourself. What was the question in the 2000s? The question they asked the most, based on survey in the interview, is debunked now, but the question they used to ask the most was, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Psychologists have now come to realize that you can't just ask that question. It's not a proper question to ask in a HR interview, because unless you prepare somebody to come to answer that question, you're going to get a whack answer. And so a lot of people gave whack answers. But saying that, I think if you take the time to think about where you would like to be, where you are right now, it will help you to plan for answering that question. So the first point I want to make is, in managing sudden change, is know what you have in your hand. Because if you have to pivot because your company just disappeared, or you have to change jobs because you have moved countries, right? When I moved from Nigeria to London in 1993, I wrote 109 applications, and I got 109 rejections. In fact, let's say, it's better to say I got 109 no response, right? Because even the one that responded, they said, even if I was going to hire anybody, why would I hire you that doesn't know anything about the UK? When I fired somebody last week, I'd rather rehire the person I fired instead of hiring you. You don't know anything about building regulations in the UK, and you want a job. And so, but I knew what I had in my hand. What I had in my hand was my ability to work. I could work. I could do anything. And I didn't want to sit down and just take government money. So I said, okay, what job is available? They said security. All right. You see what I'm saying? Because I had a personal evaluation of who I am. And don't wait for it. You have to evaluate yourself. Know thyself. So when an opportunity comes your way, we think that you'll be very good for this position. Even if they think that you're right, but you know that you're not right, you better quickly talk. That, yes, you think I'm right for this position, but I don't think I'm right. And here's why. And it creates a dialogue. So when my boss came to me and said, I'm leaving, we want to double promote you, take over. You know my answer to that thing? I say it now as a great story, but when they told me, I said no. I said I cannot do it. I have a young family. They wanted me to pack up my bags and move to Philadelphia. I said I cannot move to Philadelphia. So if you think I'm the one to do this job, what's the compromise? They said, okay, you can go for 2 weeks, come back for 2 weeks, go for 2 weeks, come back for 2 weeks. Normally, we would rather relocate you so that we don't have to be paying airfare back and forth. But we want you to do the job. Your boss said you're the right person to do the job, so we will compromise because I knew myself. Right? You see what I'm saying? Like, even in the face of great opportunity, you need to understand what works for you and what doesn't. Remember, the opportunity came to me. I didn't go looking for it. It came. So it gives me more negotiation power. So knowing what's in your hand is very, very important. Just keep doing the evaluation, which means if you're evaluating yourself, you will force yourself to do what? Keep growing. People don't grow because they think that they're where they're supposed to be. I try and read, try is a word, 12 books every year to stretch my imagination, stretch my mindset, push myself in areas that I'm not in, understand certain things. You know why I do that? Because I learned, right? Why is Bill Gates doing Bill Gates Foundation now? Because when he was a multi-millionaire, well, when he started Microsoft, he used to go on reading holidays. You know what reading holidays? He will rent a yacht, invite a professor of the area he was interested in, and take them on a one-week cruise to learn from them. That's how I learned about infectious diseases. He invited a professor of infectious diseases, took them on a one-week cruise, enjoyment. The only thing you have to do is that in the evenings you lecture me. And I'll read your book, I'll ask you questions. You understand? Like, if you really want to learn about something, you just have to create time to do it. But you need to know, what do I know about this subject? Moving on. Number 2. Oh, sorry, no, before we get to number 2. Believing in yourself and your ability is very important, right? It's part of this self-evaluation. Understand, believing in yourself, right? Nobody else will believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. Let's take a Christian line again. I'm alluding to Christianity because that's my faith, right? Christian line that says, love your neighbor how? As yourself. So if you don't love yourself, how can you love your neighbor? So you have to have self-love, not in the I love myself, look at me, Instagram posts. No, I'm talking about loving yourself as in taking care of yourself, growing yourself, maturing yourself, encouraging yourself. And so what I say on this slide here is believe in yourself and your abilities. You have come this far because of your skills and talents. You are where you are today because of what you have. So the question is what you have now, the skills you have now, the talent you have now, is it enough to take you where you are thinking of going? Because if it's not, then you better start learning and increasing yourself. Next point on managing sudden change is that you have to leverage the power of your network, right? Because your network is your net worth. I can't count how many times I've been in a jam and it's been an email, a phone call to somebody, and my network comes through for me. Right? Your network is the power. It's so powerful. And some people don't really understand how to manage a network. So I thought I'll just give you 5 steps. Number 1, what is your network? Like, I said to people that if you're in a career space and you don't have LinkedIn, you're in trouble. For now, who knows? Maybe next year there'll be something else. But for now, if you don't have LinkedIn, you are not in the right space. Facebook is not a place where you build your career. Twitter is not a space where you build your career. X is not a space where you build your career. But if you want to build your career, LinkedIn is the place. So understand where your network is. Number 2, connect to your network. Right? People have right now I have 16,000 people in my network. Right? In my network. And I make sure that I touch 80% of that 16,000 people in 1 year. That's my desire, somehow. Either by a message, birthday message, or liking their post, I will connect with my network at least once in a year. Right? Now, if it's somebody I really want to build something with, I'm going to do a lot more than once. Right? I'm going to build a lot more than once. I'm going to be following them. I'm going to be seeing what they're doing. I'm going to be in their business. Because I want to get to a place where we can build rapport. Learn from your network. Then, the one that most people don't do, they don't do well, is give to your network. Your network is not just one directional flow, what you can get. The question is, what can you give to your network? And then finally, connect others to your network. The thing I love to do the most, right, in the last 2 years, is to connect people in my network to other people. Oh, I'm looking for somebody that can do this. I just go on LinkedIn, add the 2 of you into a chat. Once you are connected, I drop out. I don't care. Continue your conversation, right? Connect others to your network, because the more you connect others to your network, the more networked you become, All right? So leverage the power of your network, because when sudden change happens to you, guess what? Your safety net is your network. Your safety net is your network. Let me give you an example. I was made redundant around this time last year and took some time off, went traveling, blah, 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 decided that, okay, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I want to work for myself. I'm going to become a consultant. I'm going to be independent, blah, blah, blah. I went to dinner with my former boss. And she said, oh, by the way, you said you wanted to do consulting. It's good. I have a project for you. We just went to dinner. I didn't go there looking for a job. But she said, oh, you said that you are interested in this. Okay, you know what? When you get through your garden leave, contact me and we'll see. Now, I'm in the 8th month of that project. Right? That's my network working for me. That was my safety net. It was there to catch me. And if you can do the same for others, you will build a reputation as somebody that people want to connect with. Third point, end game mindset. What's your 1-year plan? And I know I've got into trouble for this. I don't mentor or coach anybody that doesn't have a 1-year plan or a 5-year plan. First question I ask you, what's your 1-year plan, what's your 5-year plan? It's not what you want to become in 5 years, though. It's what is your 5-year plan. Think about it. Business, career, family, all the areas of your life. Where would you like to be in 5 years' time? And my point is, if you cannot take the time to sit down and think of a 5-year plan, why should I even waste my time mentoring you? That's me. Don't judge me. Other people might take you on board, but me, I don't have time. Because my time is precious. So if you are not going to take the time to think of a 5-year plan, then I don't have time to spend time with you. So find somebody else. There are many people that can mentor, right? So because if you don't have a 5-year plan, you can't have an end game plan. When I talk about an end game plan, I'm talking about end game plan. Like when you retire, what do you want to be doing? I want to just start my career. We're talking about retirement, right? Because if you don't plan, guess what? When you get there, you'll be in trouble. So you got to plan for the end game. And guess what? If you write down a plan, the beautiful thing about a plan is that it's changeable. It taught us in civil engineering. A plan is just a linear graph that can move. But you have to have a plan. Start with a plan. As they say, people who don't plan to fail. So how do you build a plan? How do you build a plan? For anybody who's sitting here and saying to themselves, or watching this later, and saying, how do you build a plan? Number one, start with why. Simon Sinek wrote an amazing book. I've recommended a few books already, but Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, fantastic book. It makes you think about why. Why do you do what you do? Why are who you are? Why do you wake up in the morning and go and get on the bus or drive in traffic to get to the office? Why do you do it? Not the money side, the real why, the hidden meaning. Number two, like I said, I'm going to overplay this card. Get a mentor. See, if you know where you want to go, look for a mentor who's already been there and get them to mentor you. Finally, mind map your life journey. You know what a mind map is? Does anybody know what a mind map? Mind map? Have you heard of a mind map? So a mind map is it's a set of bubbles where you just start with, let's say, for example, where am I now in my story, right? Do a first bubble. Then you say, okay, I've got my degree, I've got my first job. What do I want to do? What do I want to do next? So use a mind map to kind of begin to build out the bit like a skeleton of all the things you want to do. Do you want to get married? When do you want to get married? And when you get married, what do you want to do? Do you want to have kids? Just play with it. And all of a sudden, your life will be in front of you. And then you begin to say, okay, what is important? Of all the things that I do on a day-by-day basis, what is important? And what do I need to pay attention to? And then you kind of get a pathway. So, end game mindset. Next. Sorry, I'm changing it there, but I'm not changing it here. So, what time is it on your career timeline? Where are you on your career journey? Are you at the start of your career? like you're a fresh graduate and you just started and you're kind of trying to find your way as you are? Or are you in the middle? Like, whoa, I've got 15 years experience now, I've got 10 years experience, I kind of know what I want to do. My kids are now in school, I want to privately educate them, so I need cash. And so right now in my life, actually cash is more important than impact or, whatever it is, right? Or are you on your last rodeo? Is this the last job you're going to do, and after this is retirement? Or are you like Warren Buffett? At 98, you're still working. The guy is 98 years old. He's still working. He's still making business decisions. He's still going to board meetings. And you know what? Faith comes into play now. Let me say, I was just thinking one day, and I felt God said to me, like, you know why they cannot, why Warren Buffett doesn't need to retire? He owns his own company. So if he decides at 99 he still wants to be working and going to the board meeting, he's in control. He's the one in charge. And so sometimes having this concept of self-employment and being able to direct your own costs sometimes is very helpful. Not always, because not all of us are good on our own. Some of us need to be in a corporate environment telling you what to do. If they leave you to be an entrepreneur, nothing will move, right? Then finally, is it time to pivot? So sometimes you're in your career, you're 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 years in, 20 years in. I was talking to a guy yesterday, 20 years into his career, but he's thinking to himself, I want to do real estate. I don't want to do finance anymore. But do I have the courage to transition? And so understanding where you are on your timeline is very, very important. It goes back to understanding you. Because if you understand where you're in your timeline, when sudden change happens to you, you will know whether this is the time for you now to go be like yourself, or is this time to look for another job, or is this time where you actually can take a break? Or is this time to set up a business, right? So sudden change is influenced by where you are on your career journey, right? If you are just starting your career and your company goes bust, you have to look for another job. It's not a prayer point. Right? Because you've just started. You don't even know where you're going to go, right? But if you're kind of like mid-crisis or you've been thinking about, sometimes you're thinking about an idea and then all of a sudden they say, we are trying to lay people off. Give you an option. Do you want to take the money or do you want to stay? Sometimes you want to put your hand up and say, please give me the money. I'm ready. Because I'm ready now because my brain has been working on this idea. So once you release me, boom, I'm gone. Okay. And in that sense of where you are on your career timeline, these three words are very important. And they will mean different things to you depending on where you are. Number one, what is the impact that you're having? I'm talking about impact in your career, impact in your life. What's the impact that you're having? What's the impact you want to have? So when sudden change happens to you, you have to think about your overall impact. And then even from a very young age, you want to start thinking about what legacy do I want to leave behind? And then the third bit is, what value are you creating? Value creation is like the most important thing you can do in the career space. Like if you create value for me, I will find a way. I will find a way to add value to you. There's a guy I hired, right? I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a second. There's a guy I hired. This guy knew nothing about the product I hired him for. But in the interview, he came across as knowing how to find the solution. So he didn't understand anything about the problem and didn't know anything about the software. But Marco knew, like I found out from the interview that this guy is going to laser focus, deliver value for me. Right? So I hired him. My boss was like, we're not sure, he doesn't know the product. I said, don't worry, he doesn't know the product. 6 months, he was a product expert. 6 months, he was a product expert. After 1 year, we had to fire people. Because he just showed us that these guys were doing nothing. One of my employees had outsourced her job. So I was paying for my employer. My employee had now gone to hire an expert. So I was paying double for the same job to be done. And on top of that, she was now charging me overtime. So I was paying 3 times to get the same results. 3 times. And I didn't know. But Marco he just said, would you like to see under the covers? I said, show me. And he showed me. I was like, And so, what do you think I'm going to do for Marco? When it comes for retention, reward, because he has given me value. I broke the bank. My boss called me and said, excuse me, you know you are breaking the bank right now. I said, yes, because look at what this guy has done. He's proven his value. So I'm willing to defend. Well, then you have to give up some of your own reward. I said, fine. So that year, Marco got more stocks and shares than I got. But it was worth it. And I was willing to go to bat for him because he gave me value. My boss doesn't like me. Are you giving them value? Give them real value. Yes, I know you tell me the Nigerian factor. You tell me they are not from my country. They're not from my tribe. They're not. I say forget about all those things. Deliver value. Value will speak for you. I almost feel like I should preach, but let me stop before I move into a different dimension. So, I think we're at number 5 now. Resilience and grit, right? Resilience and grit, and I don't want to belabor. Let's get a definition for the resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly from a setback. When a sudden change happens to you, sometimes it could be a setback. And resilience is that ability to quickly recover from it. Your ability to adapt to change, to thrive in the face of adversity, to maintain a positive outlook in the face of imminent disaster. Finding ways to cope with stress and challenges. Resilience is not falling apart when things get bad, even though you have every right to fall apart. Resilience is no. We'll get through this. Third mainland is closed, but we are going to VI. Resilience will find a way to get there. Grit, on the other hand, is the ability to preserve, to persevere, to maintain focus on the long-term goal. You need grit to do that. You need to be able to face obstacles, look at setbacks, and combine passion and perseverance to really push through. Grit is like a driver of achievement and success. It's independent and beyond what talent and intelligence can contribute. So you might have talent, you might have zeal, you might have a passion, but unless you have grit, you might not deliver. Because grit is the ability to push your passion forward. Grit says, yes, I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. to make a 7 o'clock meeting. I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. That's grit. It drives you forward. It's independent of talent. It goes beyond talent. It goes beyond intelligence. It's just something that just pushes you forward. But you need a combination of resilience. You need grit. Both of these two things together is what really gives you the ability to manage sudden change. Resilience helps you bounce back. Like when you get fired from a project, resilience makes you think, hey, Shola, you're better than that. Gather yourself. Go forward. Grit makes you say, look, this project, it looks like it's going to kill us. Nobody has ever sold in this department before. Long term, there might not be any success. But grit makes you say, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do what I need to do to get the answer that I need. That's grit. So combining resilience and grit when sudden change happens to you is really, really helpful to kind of push you through to the other side. So what do you see ahead of you, right? And I intentionally do this slide because I want people to understand that having an end game plan is your ability to see. It's combined. It's like chicken and egg. You can't see what's ahead of you unless you start planning for it. But unless you see, you can't plan. Now Joseph knew the end game. He knew that in 14 years' time, there was going to be famine. There was going to be, people are not going to have food, so he had to plan. So he knew what the end game was. He knew what was ahead of him. Your end game informs your next step. What is your end game? It informs your next step. If your end game is that you want to be the best in the field you studied in, you cannot be distracted, even if you are hungry, right? Because your end game is you want to be, so you have to look for something that's in your field that will feed you, even if they mean stepping down, right? But if your end game is not to be, like I didn't want to be the best civil engineer that existed in the planet, right? I just wanted to follow my passion. And so once you understand your passion, it helps you inform your end game. Mentors help you see what's ahead of you. And then that leads us to the next slide. Okay. A bit wordy, sorry, but I kind of want to cover a few things. We've talked about mentors a lot today, but I want to highlight a couple of things. So the first thing that I discovered about mentorship, that I saw and experienced myself was mentors see greatness in you, and they, the mentor, they find a way of bringing that out of you. That's what Barry did for me. He saw that I could do this. Even though I had 14% over 100, he was like, no, there's something inside of you that if I draw it out, if I use the right questions, the right technique, I'll be able to draw you out. And then Barry, at the time I met him, he was already 12 years, was it 12? 15 years a partner. He was one of the partners that was on the Lehman Brothers. You know, when Lehman Brothers was reacquired, when PwC reacquired it, he was the lead partner on that project. So his experience in Boku, right? So he knew where I was going, and he started showing me shortcuts to get to my destination. A mentor is a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. Whereas a coach, an effective coach, gives you methods, and this is the difference between a mentor and a coach. A mentor has been where you're trying to go. A coach hasn't, and they don't need to. They just know how to coach you to get to where you need to get to. A mentor has actually been there. He knows, like if the difference between a coach, let's use football analogy. A coach might never have scored a goal in his life, but he knows how to rally the troops, rally the defenders, rally the goalkeeper to score a goal. A mentor is someone that has scored a goal. I put it in the right corner, I put it in the left corner. When I took a penalty, I stepped back, I sidestepped, then right? And you can go and watch the video, you know he did that, right? That a mentor can tell you what the mindset you need to have. A coach says, Shola, you can do this. You're not going to miss that penalty. Go for it. Yeah, I believe in you. You've done the training. Now the world is the eyes are on you. Pats you on the back. You got this. Right? And so the coach's intention is to build your confidence, your self-esteem. They cheer you on. They want to make you a better version of yourself. They use knowledge and expertise to help you become a better individual, a better team. That's the difference between a coach and a coach and a mentor. All right, now, remember this. Managing sudden change can be a challenging experience, but with time, patience, grit, and resilience, and courage, actually, you can successfully navigate it. Okay, I talked about making some recommendations for books. I love reading, and these are 4 books that I would encourage you to read. Winning, definitely, I read it every year. I haven't started this year, but every year I reread it. I read the whole book again. It's the first book I read that I threw across the room. What? I was like, what are you saying? I threw the book across the room. I was like, I'm not reading this. This is too dangerous. I threw it across. Then I went again, I picked it up, and I read it. Because you know what he said? He said that winning is the most forgetful thing, because the moment you win, you have to start again. If you win the premiership this year, next year, you have to start again. If you win a race, to keep winning, you got to keep walking. And winning is the most unforgiving companion. Because it doesn't matter whether you won it 12 times. It doesn't care. Now you want to win again, you have to go through the same process to win. I just flung the book. I was like, why should winning be so hard? But this is a guy that has coached, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. Like he said that Michael Jordan doesn't practice how to put the ball in the hoop. He knows how to put it. He can close his eyes and put the ball in the hoop. That's what he practices. I'll just give you a sneak preview of this book. When Tim Grove was coaching Michael Jordan, you know what he used to do? I can't even imagine him having to do this, right? This was before YouTube and everything. During a match, first of all, during a match, the match is videoed, but during the match, he will count, this is the coach, how many times Michael Jordan stepped on his right foot. Think about basketball or how they're running from court to court. He actually would end the game knowing that Michael Jordan took 3,000 steps with his right leg and 4,000 steps with his left leg. I say, what? Because he said when he gets to the gym, he then knows that, okay, you haven't worked your right leg as much as your left leg. So for training, we're going to work on the left leg. I was like, he said, if you want to win, you got to count the steps. You got to know which muscle is not ready for the next. Because he said Michael knows how to put the ball in the hoop. What Michael needs to learn is what do you do when a defender wants to bash you, block you. When you suddenly change and everything is changed because 3 defenders are now in front of you, the hoop is in front of you. How do you get to that hoop? Sorry. I think I've done enough marketing for this book. But you see what I'm saying? That it's a very powerful book. Winning. Just read it. And I tell you, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous read. Very dangerous. Because it will challenge your whole concept of what it looks like to win. Next book is by Ram Chandra. If I grew up, that's the kind of guy I want to be like. Ram Chandra has been in almost every boardroom for FTSE, for the Forbes 200. They just invite him to the boardroom to sit down, listen, and advise. And so he wrote this book about high potential. He really wrote the book to help high potential leaders find high potential leaders. So he wrote this book called The High Potential Leader. Very, very powerful book. Then the third book, if you're a consultant, this is more important, but even if you're not, it's like very, very powerful. How to lead smart people. So I used to think that multitasking was a thing until I read this book. And he said, actually, you never multitask. Not female, not male. Nobody multitasks. You just switch tasks very fast. I was like, whoa. You can't multitask. There's nobody multitasks. It's just your ability to switch tasks. Women switch tasks faster. So they're either looking at the baby and driving or looking at their phone. You are literally, maybe it's microseconds, you are never multitasking. You're always doing one thing at a time. It's just that your ability to switch between 2 things is what's very fast. And that's why multitasking is the most inefficient thing you can do in your life. Because as a human being, you're not designed to multitask. You're designed to finish a task and move to the next one. So it's your ability to finish the task quickly and move to the next task is how you become more efficient. I was like, that's transformational. So you can just buy it for that chapter alone. And then finally, the story of Meto, betting on a darky, a great friend, and a guy who basically broke all the rules, right? He was the first engineering graduate. The president of South Africa had to sign off that he could go and study engineering, because at that time, no black person had studied engineering. When he went into his factory for the first day, he went into the direction of the whites because he was an engineer. And they pulled him back and said, excuse me, you're going the wrong way. Blacks go that way. He said, not this black. I'm an engineer. They were shocked. Then he went on to lead major organizations, Microsoft, MTN in South Africa, and now leads a conglomerate, leads a fund. But he writes this book and just tells his story. Such an eye-opener, betting on a darky, how and again, the book is really about coaching and mentoring, how people just betted on him, helped him, gave him a ladder, showed him, because he didn't have any black person in front of him. Nobody to show him the way. They were all Caucasians. Anyway, so that's that reads. And then I've released a new book called Managing. So this seminar has kind of led to a book, which is on pre-launch release. So if you scan the QR code, we'll send you an email. Scan the QR code. For the next 1 week, you can get the pre-launch release of the book for dirt cheap. And then after 1 week, we'll do the proper launch for the proper book. So you are seeing a preview at a very cheap price. So we'll email this to you anyway, but if you have your phone, you can get this QR code. I'll leave for a few seconds. Takes you to Paystack, and then you can get the book called Managing Sudden Change for Career Progression. Managing Sudden Change in Your Career Journey. All right? Don't worry, you get an email with this. For those who are not linked with me on LinkedIn, my next slide is that. While I wait for... You know what I'll do is that at the end, I'll put this slide back up. So if people still want to get it. So if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, you can scan that QR code and I will accept your connect on LinkedIn. Or you just look for my name on LinkedIn and I will accept. I like accepting people. I won't talk about this, but this is a book I wrote earlier called Managing Up for Career Progression. How do you progress your career? And this book kind of talks about that. Again, you can get it online. So let's go back to where it started from, and then we'll take questions. Sudden change in a career journey can both be challenging and exciting. But it often requires adopting new skills, learning a new job, potentially even starting over in a new industry. But the key thing I want to leave when I put this slide back up is it can be both challenging and exciting. So enjoy the journey. Questions? Yes, Mr. Hillary.
Thank you very much for the seminar and all the information you're giving us. I want to ask, what if you feel that, if I as a person, if I feel that, okay, I'm not capable enough, and all my history has showed that, but I actually have an opportunity now, and I want to take the opportunity, what do I do then? Because sometimes sometimes you don't get an opportunity, and when you get the opportunity, it's like, okay, I'm not sure whether I can actually, do it because of I've not got that. I've not in the past. I haven't been successful, and I have I have a lot of track record. Like, okay, if I want to show that I'm successful, my past performance will prove that. But now I have an opportunity. I have to take this opportunity. So how do I navigate that in that situation?
Okay, so this question is a good question because the reality is that life will always throw things at us that we're not ready for. But I like to answer this question with two things, and I'm going to tailor back to those two things. Number one, remember we talked about fear and doubt. So sometimes you might have fear that you are not going to perform. So you need to understand whether you are in fear of, oh, maybe I will not perform, or you are doubting your own ability. Because if you're doubting your own ability, you're on ice, and it will crack, right? But if you are in a place in which I'm just scared that I might not achieve, or I might not be as good as I thought, that's okay. Because fear heightens your awareness. Okay, I might not be as good as they think I am, but I will show them that I can do it, right? So you go in with this determination. Fear makes you become alert. Like, I knew I wasn't the best programmer. I knew I was not the best programmer. Like, in fact, myself, I was getting almost into doubt that maybe these people have hired the wrong person. But the fear of failure fired me to study, fired me to understudy, fired me to prove them wrong, that I can do this. I know that I'm a good person. I might not have done this thing before, but there are things I've done before that I can definitely do. So I'm going to take that experience, not in this thing because it's new to me, but I'm going to learn all I need to learn, and I'm going to be very good at it. So that's the first thing I would say. Then the second thing I would say is that, again, mentorship, coaching, like if you get into an industry that you're not very good at, look very quickly. Use LinkedIn. Use whatever. Like the company you're going to, go on LinkedIn. Find somebody who works in that company already. Message them. DM them. Hello, I'm joining your company, blah, blah, blah. I just want to understand what the culture is, how the things work, like how was your journey? The best question you can ask somebody on your day one in an office is, how was your journey? into the company? It's the best question you can ask. It's my number one question. When somebody, like I have a buddy, I just say, okay, how was your journey? Because when they tell you their own journey, you can begin to understand what your journey could look like. Doesn't mean it's the be all end all, but they're giving you a perspective. When I took my daughters to go to a university, there's always a student that's taking them around. I always ask my daughters to ask them, how have you found the school? And it reveals how it is. On the basis of that revelation, as you're going around, you keep your eyes open. So just asking questions will be a very good thing. Right? And people are always afraid to ask questions because they think it makes you look that you're not. No, questions is the best solution. Right? But there's a way you can ask it that doesn't reveal that you don't know. To say, oh, please tell me. Like when you joined the company, how was it? Like, how did you get on with your peers? Did you immediately integrate? People, you'll be shocked how much people want to share their stories. So, did that answer your question, sir? Yeah. Okay. Okay, question here. My sister-in-law. Oh, your mic is not on.
You talked about mentor and coach.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a situation where you had a bad advice from either of the mentor or the coach? And how can one decipher when you are actually getting a bad advice? Because it gets to a point in life you begin to trust what comes out from your mentor's mouth and your coach. So when do you know, how can you differentiate?
Okay. Let me take a deep breath before I answer that. Okay. So I think to answer that, and I will give you some examples quickly. The first thing is that no matter how, okay, rewind. A good mentor builds upon you. Right? A good mentor doesn't say, you're going the wrong way, follow me, I'll show you the way. A good mentor tries to understand, particularly a good mentor, a coach, was like, okay, where are you trying to get to? And always views things from your point of view, right? Now, maybe I can give you a good example. I said I was going to give you an example. I had an example where a coach in the same year gave me 2 different advices. In the same year. I mean, I remember things. So I remember what he told me when we first met. I remember what he told me to do. So I was going on that direction, and the moment I now went back for my second session, it was like, no, that direction is wrong. So I was confused. I was scratching my head. Excuse me, sir. You are the one that told me that I should go in this direction. And then he revealed that actually, he told me to go in that direction because he wanted to see what was in my heart. And now that I've revealed what's in my heart, he realizes that I'm not ready to go fully in that direction. But him coaching me to go in that direction was to expose what was in my heart. I was like, and then when he said that, I realized that actually, when he gave me that advice the first time, I was a different person. And he knew it. So, to kind of maybe add a bit more complexity to your question, is the fact that even your mentor can tell you to do something, but you yourself as a human being, you are changing. Right? Like your mentor might say, go and sue the company that fired you because he knows you are angry. If you yourself get to a place of forgiving them, your mentor has told you to sue them, do you still sue? You see what I'm saying? Because you yourself, you're a human being. You're not a object. So you have to understand, and that's why I keep saying that as much as I do mentoring and coaching, my mentoring and coaching is centered around you understanding yourself, you understanding what you are doing. So a situation of where a mentor has given you wrong advice doesn't really come into play as much because the mentor is advising you as you are changing. So I know that that's kind of broadened your question, but to answer the specific question is that at the end of the day, when a mentor advises you, you have to know whether this is right for you. Right? It's the same question that people ask me, when do you know it's time for you to change a mentor or a coach? When you outgrow your mentor or your coach. Right? So I'll give you one example and then I'll take the next question. I had a career coach, right? That they gave to me. They said that he will kind of help me increase my career, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to him 3 times. I said to him, I'm ready for promotion. He said, no. Second time, I'm ready for promotion. He said, no. Third time, I said, you know what? I'm ready for promotion, and you're not taking me there. I fired him. I said, I don't want you to be my career coach anymore. Right? And guess what happened? I got that promotion 6 months later with a different career coach. 18 months later, I was his boss. Was it 18? Maybe more than that. But ultimately, by the time I was leaving the company, he was reporting to me. So I understand, when I joined the company, I was a manager, he was a senior manager. Then I became a senior manager, then I became a director. And so now, I was the one telling him what to do. Imagine if I had allowed him to hold me down. Me and him would be in the same level till now, right? So sometimes you need to go against what you're being told because you know yourself better. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll take one more question, and then we'll end. Yes, over there. I hope you found this helpful, right? We'll find a way of getting feedback properly. So.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm grateful for all of the information and the training and teaching that has come through. My name is Joy Upuda, and I have a question regarding, it's in line with sudden career change, and it has to do with, if you're venturing into sort of setting out on your own, and there's a certain quality standard that you have in mind, but you don't have as much time as you would have liked. How do I put this? You know, if you already had systems and structures in place, and then you have clients who are requesting certain services of you, you know you can deliver them, but you don't have those systems that you would like to have. And so there's certain quality standards that you would have liked to have in place that you don't have at the moment.
Yeah.
How do you identify how to deliver to them what you have at the best quality at the moment? The quality is not necessarily less. Maybe it's just in your mind because you're a perfectionist. I don't know. But how do you make sure that you're balancing that? You're not giving them less than what is necessary or what you've decided your brand is about. At the same time, you don't have as much. You've not put in enough time. You don't have as much time on the business yet to have put everything together. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So there's multi-dimensions of what the question you've asked, right? So let me start with the first dimension. It's a consulting term called quality, time, cost. It's a triangle, right? You're either going to compromise on quality, increase costs, take longer time to deliver, or you're going to stick to the delivery time and reduce quality, reduce costs, right? So you've got to keep that triangle in a loop. Like, how much are they paying for it? What's the time for delivery? What's more important to the client? Is delivery more important than the quality? And remember, you kept saying, and I like it because it reveals something, you kept saying your standard for it. The question is, what is the client standard? Understand, yeah. I have my sister-in-law here who is also a designer, and she designs things. Like, so sometimes, right, your client wants the best thing in the world, but they want to pay a little bit, and they're giving you a time delivery of impossible to deliver that quality. So you have to tell the client, what do you want, Gongon? Exactly what do you want? Because I have to deliver to you what I have time and the cost you've paid at the quality you want, right? So that's the first side. Number two, how do you distinguish between giving your client what you think as a perfectionist is best for them and compromising time for delivery, right? So sometimes you almost need to be in this battle of what am I trying to represent? Do I deliver on time and I'm known to deliver on time? Or do I deliver quality because I am going to keep my standards very high, that you know that whenever you go and get a Louis Vuitton bag, if a bit of it is wrong, you can return the bag because it doesn't meet the standard of the quality that you are paying for, right? So you need to determine for yourself what is more important for your brand at this time. Is it to deliver on time with the caveat that, if you give me more time, if you give me one more day, I could make this quality a little bit higher, but I've delivered to you on time. But if you give me some time, I could make it different. So having that conversation with your client is very, very important. So it's the same thing in consulting. Like you get a contract and it's okay, you have to deliver this by this time at this cost. And you're like, this work. Let me give you a good example. A good example. It's kind of a reverse of your question. When I moved from Accenture to PwC, Accenture, we are known that we don't talk to the client too much. We just deliver. We are like deliver. Like when you sign, delivery is the main idea. Whether you define the product very well, that's your problem. But what you ask for is what I'm going to deliver to you. When I joined PwC, we had a different mindset because we are, most importantly, accountants than consultants. And so we're always thinking of the long term that, okay, if I deliver a botch job to you now, when you want to consider me for the multi-million audit, you won't give it to me because I gave you a botch job. So we're always thinking about future opportunities. So when I moved from Accenture to PwC, where Accenture was deliver, PwC was almost like, stand back, ask the client. You asked me to give you this. Do you really want that? Why don't I do a trial for you? Give you an example for you to see whether the color blue is what you really want. And I was like, how does this even work? So I got a project. Sorry, it's a long answer to your question. I got a project, and they asked us to deliver. They would give us like 4 weeks. So we had 4 weeks of time at X amount of money. Can you go and do an investigation and find out what the problem is? And literally in 5 days, we knew what the answer was. Now in my old company, we would just wait to the end of the month, then we give the answer. But my new company said, no, let's go to the client and tell them that the project you told us to take 4 weeks for, we have done it in 1 week. We are done. And you know what the client said? He says, thank you so much for being truthful. Because of that, you can now implement it. And that led to a 2-year contract. Right? Just a different mindset, right? Because the interesting bit was not about how much money I could get out of you or how quickly I could deliver it. It was more about the quality of the work I was delivering because of the long-term relationship. So you have to decide for yourself what is more important for your brand now, and remember that you can always still change that, right? So you maybe are known for time, and you're very good on time, but then next you can now become known for quality or cost, all right? Okay, no more questions. Maybe take it personally because I did want to finish by 6:30, and we're now at 22:07. So thank you all for coming. I will still be hanging around for another 20 minutes. We still have the hall for another 30, so I can take one-on-one questions. Thank you for coming in, and we will make sure that the slides are emailed to you if you registered. All right. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I think so. Muiwa, do you want us to try and quickly do a group picture? So he would challenge me that I let everybody go away. So if you don't mind, can we do a quick group picture? Stand. They should come on stage. I don't think they want to go on stage. Okay, go on stage, please. If anybody is happy to quickly take a picture. Yeah. Yeah, just climb the stage. Thank you. We'll do it quickly, and then you can go. Sorry. Oh, thank you, tech team, for helping us out. Thank you very much. God bless you guys.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Finally meeting you,
okay,
sir.
yeah.